Yo, what's going on YouTube, and welcome back to Goal Line Hockey. It's your boy Kevin Forte, and it is time for our Week 6 NHL Power Rankings for the 2021 NHL season, February 26th edition. We'll be heading into another week of the NHL season, a lot of power ranking updates, a lot of teams moving up and down. We have a new number one, and a couple teams in the top 10 moving around a quite significant amount. So we'll be taking a look at all of that in this video. If you guys like what we're doing here at Goal Line Hockey, want to see the latest news around the NHL, make sure to give this video a big thumbs up and even bigger subscribe down below. And let's take a look at our Week 6 NHL Power Rankings. So it was a big week for power rankings. We saw a quite significant shift this week in our rankings. A lot of teams that were doing really well moved up, and a lot of teams that weren't doing so well, they moved down. All right, so let's get into this week's power rankings. So staying at number 31 this week, the same as now the last 2 or 3 weeks, is the Anaheim Ducks. This has been a rough season for the Anaheim Ducks. I'll be posting a video this weekend, probably tomorrow, about the Anaheim Ducks' struggles early on this season. It's been a real tough start for the Ducks, just not enough scoring. Yes, they finally brought up Trevor Zegras, which is a great sign, but the problem is they still need more goal scoring. That's been the issue here for the Ducks, and it's something that they can fix hopefully soon, but as of right now, not a great start for the Ducks, and this is going to be a long year in Anaheim. At number 30 is the Vancouver Canucks, staying at 30 this week. Another rough week for the Vancouver Canucks. I mean, the games they've been giving up, they blew another lead to Edmonton earlier this week. Just, the blown lead against Calgary last week. It's Edmonton this week. You're playing the same teams in your division every game. You can't have those every week, especially against your division rivals. This is a tough start to the season here for the Vancouver Canucks. They're probably not going to get themselves out of the hole that they've dug themselves into, and they really took a hit. And their power rankings, they're pretty much as low as it gets, besides Anaheim. At number 29 in our power rankings, we got the Detroit Red Wings. The Detroit Red Wings have had another rough season, especially in that Central Division, which is, honestly, you could consider the easier division, but I don't know, there really isn't a easy division. I mean, you look at all the teams, the top teams in the East Division, but it seems like every division you have at least 2 teams that are really struggling in their matchups, and Detroit's the one in the Central. Been a rough start, like I said. They're having some issues. The veterans, guys like Franz Nielsen, are struggling. They have a couple key injuries, which has definitely not helped. The Red Wings are in a rebuild, so this is no real surprise. Like I said, once we get close to the trade deadline, we'll see what they do. Do we maybe see them move a guy like Bobby Ryan or Danny DeKeyser at the deadline? Maybe even potentially a guy like Thomas Greiss if he becomes available. At number 28 is the Buffalo Sabres. Yes, the Buffalo Sabres. Now, the Sabres had an interesting week. They were losing to everybody except the New Jersey Devils. It seemed like, they came back, like I said, when they came back from the break against the Islanders last week, lethargic. Lethargic was the word for the Buffalo Sabres, and they've come back from that just slightly. They've won 2 games against the Devils, who are honestly a pretty respectable team, but those are the only wins they've had since they've come back to the NHL. They lost to Washington last week. I think they lost to Philly over the weekend, so it's been a rough season for the Buffalo Sabres. And like I said, it's good that they're beating the Devils. That's a pretty solid team, but let's be honest, those are the 2 bottom feeders right now in that East Division. So take with that what you will. Another bottom feeder in the Central Division, besides Detroit, is the Nashville Predators at 27 in our power rankings. Now, the Nashville Predators have been, they got off to a really bad start, and they've never really recovered from that. Now, the rumor is David Poile has come out and said that our head coach, John Hines, will be staying for now. There is no, plans on moving him out, and this is going to be more of a roster shift for the Nashville Predators. Now, it seems like Ryan Ellis is he is not on the trade block. Roman Josi and Pekka Rinne. Those are the 3 non-negotiable names right now in Nashville. So that means Eli Tolvanen, which I think would be an interesting name. Nobody's really talking about that. Dante Fabro, defenseman. Dante Fabro. Philip Forsberg. Victor Arvidsson. Matthias Ekholm. These are all pretty solid players in Nashville, and they've had a really tough season this year, but maybe with a fresh start, maybe they could do quite well with a new organization. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens there with the Preds. Now, at number 26, we have the New York Rangers. Now, the Rangers have turned things around a little bit. They beat the Philadelphia Flyers earlier this week, but it's still been a struggle for this team, let's be honest. And there are certain things, obviously since the Tony DeAngelo thing, it looked like it was going to maybe get better. But things quickly regressed for the Rangers. They just don't have the skill. The coaching question is going to be there. A lot of you Ranger fans out there agree with me that David Quinn just doesn't seem like the right guy for this Rangers team. And his days may be numbered in New York by the end of this season. I hate to do stuff like that, but I think it's written on the ceiling at this point. At number 25 is the Minnesota Wild. Really haven't watched much of Minnesota recently. I know they were off for a while. They came back last week, but they've been so-so. I really haven't heard much about them. So, I mean, at the end of the day, in that division, in the Honda West division, you have to beat teams like LA. You have to beat teams like, San Jose, who are right there in the chase of making the playoffs with you. So, it's really huge here for Minnesota. Those two opponents are huge if they want to make the postseason this year. And Arizona as well. At number 24 in our power rankings, we have the Ottawa Senators. Now, that's why I'm wearing a Sens jersey, because they've won 3 games in a row and stomped on the Calgary Flames last night, a 6-1 victory, kind of a foreshadowing what's going on in Calgary. We'll get to that later. But the Ottawa Senators, I mean, they've been all right. Like I said, they've won their last 3 games. They're getting a lot of goal scoring from unknown guys. Brandstrom coming into the lineup again. That's a very promising sign. So the Ottawa Senators, yes, they have their issues. They're a young team. DJ Smith was obviously, on the chopping block earlier this year if things stayed the way they were. But now you have a 3-game winning streak. You have to feel a little bit better about yourself there in Ottawa. At number 23 in our power rankings, we have the San Jose Sharks. Now, the Sharks, this week was big for them, and they really didn't show me much that they were really getting better. They were one of the few teams I really saw this week, and they didn't really play that well. I mean, they had games that they should have won. I think they lost to St. Louis. I think they lost to either, who was it? Was it LA or Arizona? You can't lose to those teams. It's the same thing as what I was talking about with Minnesota. You have to beat those teams. Really, the key matchups in that West Division, San Jose, Minnesota, LA, and Arizona. Those 4 teams are fighting for the last playoff spot because, let's be honest, we know Colorado, Vegas, and St. Louis have those top 3 spots in the Honda West. So that means 4 teams are vying for one other spot. And I'm not even going to consider Anaheim because they're already out of the running for the playoffs. At number 22, we have the New Jersey Devils. Now, the Devils are interesting because they came back from the break on a really strong note, beating the Boston Bruins. Who else did they beat? Did they beat the Rangers last week? They did. So the Devils have been taking care of business, and they beat a really solid team like Boston, a very prestigious team, a top 10 team in our power rankings. So that's a sign of things to come for the Devils. And they struggled against Buffalo last week. They come back up in Buffalo. They get a victory in Buffalo last night. Nico Hischier getting his first of the season. Very promising there. Mackenzie Blackwood has looked great all season for the Devils, as long as he's healthy. So there's a lot of positives for this New Jersey Devils team. Yes, they aren't in a playoff spot right now. Obviously, there are things that could have gone better for them this year. They're one of the bottom 2 teams in the East Division, in my opinion. I mean, the Rangers are right there as well. But the Devils still showing just a little bit of light. At number 21, we have the Chicago Blackhawks. Now, the Blackhawks didn't have that huge bump up like they did last week. They were a bottom team in my power rankings for a while, and they were able to move up last week pretty significantly. Things have kind of trickled back just a little bit. They've been one of those teams. They're just in the middle of the pack, and you know what? To be honest, I'm happy. I think most Hawks fans would be happy with that. They still have a legit shot at making the postseason this year. Is it going to be difficult? Yes. But the opportunity is still there for the Chicago Blackhawks. Another team in that Central Division vying for a playoff spot at number 20 is the Columbus Blue Jackets. Now, the Blue Jackets, with everything with Laine and Roslovic coming in, there was a lot of turmoil in the locker room with the Dubois situation. Excuse me. It seems like a lot of that has been alleviated, which is great news for the Columbus Blue Jackets. And they could go out there, focus on playing. The goaltending injuries is getting a little ridiculous because now Korpisalo is hurt again. So just a rough situation in between the pipes, a lot of injuries. So hopefully he comes back healthy. But yeah, I mean, Columbus is in that kind of spot right now. So we'll see what happens. At number 19, moving down is the Dallas Stars. Now, the Dallas Stars didn't move too much, but again, they moved down because they haven't been taking care of business. Now, they did, split with the Florida Panthers here the last 2 days, which is good. That's a good start. Anton Khudobin really shut down the Florida Panthers the other night. They need more of that, especially with Ben Bishop out of the lineup. You still have a young Jake Ottinger as the backup. Just too much of a role for him, especially early on here. So Anton Khudobin definitely getting a fair shares of the work, and we're seeing the Dallas Stars finally score some goals this season. It's become a little bit dry recently, but they're going to need that goal scoring if they want to even consider making the postseason. And remember, they're starting to make up those games lost, and they're still finding themselves in a spot where our record is not that great. At number 18, talk about another team that really fell from grace. That is the Calgary Flames. The Flames have had a rough start to this season, and especially recently, you saw who's the goaltender, Dave Rittich, banging his head into the door down the tunnel in the locker room. Just visible frustration, and losing 6-1 to the Ottawa Senators last night obviously was the icing on the cake. Not in a good way. This has been a rough season for Calgary, and they got to figure out, the good thing is they're able to beat teams like Vancouver, but they struggle against Ottawa. If they want to make the playoffs this year, because Montreal, it's really Montreal and Calgary right now in that division. If you want to make the postseason and you're Calgary, you got to get more points. And I'm posting a video actually earlier today. If you want to see that, I'll be posting that. Actually, it's already posted, more than likely. So at the end of the video, make sure to check that out. I talk about the Calgary Flames, their situation. We kind of do a little bit of a deep dive. So if you're interested in that, make sure to check that out. Of course, after our Power Rankings. At number 17 is... Number 17 is the Arizona Coyotes. Now, the Arizona Coyotes got off to a rough start. They've been pretty rough throughout the first part of this season, but they've started to turn the corner in the best way, which is very exciting for my Yotes fans out there. They took care of business against the Ducks, not in the most, a little bit of an unorthodox way of doing it, down 3-0 in both games, coming back and winning both games. As a Ducks fan, that was very frustrating, but for the Coyotes, those were huge victories. And like I said, they're one of those 4 teams in the West Division vying for that last playoff spot. This is going to be a huge stretch here for the Arizona Coyotes, whether they become buyers or potentially, don't do much at the NHL trade deadline. Another one of those teams in the West Division at number 16 is the Los Angeles Kings, who the Kings have been on a tear. I posted a video earlier this week about the Los Angeles Kings and how solid they have been really over the past couple weeks. Now, let's also remember, Kings fans, they did do this last season, and look how things turned out. Not so pretty. So we'll see what happens, but like I said, there's a lot of excitement. We're seeing the renaissance of guys like Dustin Brown, Anze Kopitar, Jeff Carter, and then you're seeing some of the young blood. Guys like, what's his name? Gabe Velarde coming in. There's a lot of excitement for the young boys there in LA as well. So we'll see what happens with the Kings. But honestly, pretty promising overall. Man, talk about a team that had an interesting week. At number 15 is the Canadiens de Montreal. As the Montreal Canadiens are at number 15. Now, remember, they were at number 1, I think, in week 3 or 4 in our power rankings. How the mighty have fallen. Or maybe they were just a little bit overrated. I think it was a little bit of that. The Montreal Canadiens had a lot of hype going into this year, and I think they were a little bit overrated. Now, they have, since let go of their head coach, Claude Julien, and their assistant coach, Kirk Muller, and now Ducharme, I think is his name. It's a French, of course, a French head coach. Marc Bergevin is on the hot seat. And if he doesn't find a way to get this Habs team into the postseason, especially in the North Division with the way it is, there's going to be a lot of changes in Montreal. So hoping for the best for the Habs, potentially the worst. So we'll see what happens. But again, some of the moves they made last offseason were questionable, but they brought in some additions. So if it works out, great. If not, they threw a lot of money into guys that obviously they can't win the playoffs with. And they have a win now mentality with Carey Price and Shea Weber. As they're going to start to decline over the next couple years, it's going to be interesting what happens in Montreal. At number 14 is the Pittsburgh Penguins. Now, the Penguins have been doing pretty good. I mean, they did lose to Washington last night, 5-2. That's a tough game. But they beat the Islanders a couple times last week for Sidney Crosby's 1,000th NHL game or 1,000th point, whatever it is, either game or point. I forget at this point. Probably game. So Pittsburgh, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of excitement for the Penguins, considering how things started this season, with Jim Rutherford making questionable moves in the offseason, and kind of seeing, over the past couple years since their last cup, a little bit of a decline in the Pittsburgh Penguins. And Brian Burke and Ron Hextall have since come in, and they haven't done much yet, but we're going to see over the next couple months, these guys are going to be trying hard. If they want to stay in Pittsburgh, you're going to have to work your ass off if you want to stay in Pitt, because they are going to be looking to make some moves if they can. At number 13, lucky number 13 this week, no, it's not the Montreal Canadiens like it's been the past 2 weeks. It is the Winnipeg Jets. Now, the Jets have had an interesting situation. Obviously, the Dubois trade hasn't really worked out for them quite yet, as Dubois has since gone to the IR. But the Winnipeg Jets, I mean, they're a middle of the pack team, and in that North Division, they should make the postseason. But again, spots are filling up quickly. Like I said, you've got, ideally you've got Toronto and Edmonton seemingly at the top, and then everybody else kind of falls in line in some order: Winnipeg, Calgary, and Montreal. So, I think Winnipeg can make the postseason. They've got Connor Hellebuyck. As long as he stays strong, becomes a Vezina finalist, they should be in the running for sure. At number 12 is the Philadelphia Flyers. Now, the Flyers definitely took a hit in our power rankings, but a lot of it is because they just, a lot of their guys are still coming back from the whole COVID situation. So, as they start to get their roster back, they struggled a little bit with their full roster before this COVID situation in Philly. So, Carter Hart has had a rough season. He's definitely bounced back a little bit, but still a rough year, especially put on display at Lake Tahoe last weekend. So the Flyers obviously have their struggles, but they remain in the playoffs at this point in the East Division. It's a little bit more wide open in the East than it was a couple weeks back. But the Flyers, man, we'll see what happens with them. At number 11 is the St. Louis Blues. Now, the Blues kind of slipped just a little bit in our rankings because there were certain things that I just wasn't a fan of with the Blues. Like I said, they seem to struggle against some of the low teams that they should be beating, like San Jose, like LA. You beat those teams, they would already be in the postseason right now. But obviously they've made it a little more difficult on themselves by losing some of those games to LA and San Jose and even Minnesota. So we'll see what happens with the Blues. I have cautious optimism in St. Louis. So now we move up into our top 10. At number 10, we have the Washington Capitals. Now, the Washington Capitals, again, I haven't been watching a ton of hockey this week, so I can't really speculate too much on them, but they did win last night 5-2 over Pittsburgh. That's a good thing. And like I said, they need to get Ilya Samsonov back. Obviously they've had some more issues in between the pipes with Vitek Vanacek. V Squared has played well in the games he's been in, but he's obviously not the same as Samsonov. At number 9 is the Colorado Avalanche. The last weekend at Lake Tahoe put them on full display. A big victory for them in those unbelievable uniforms. The Avalanche have looked solid throughout the first part of this season. Grubauer has been unreal for the Avs, and he's going to have to continue to be that way if they really want to be a legit contender. Now, at number 8 in the East Division is the Boston Bruins. Now, you may be saying, the Boston Bruins were a top 5 team last week. You're right. But they've slipped since then. They lost to the New Jersey Devils last week. They've lost to the New York Islanders last night, which had implications on our power rankings because the gap was that close, guys. The Boston Bruins have had a good week, though. Overall, you look at what Pasta did last Sunday against those Philadelphia Flyers at Lake Tahoe. The unbelievable shades he had, just absolutely amazing. Unbelievable for Pasta. But at the end of the day, yeah, I mean, the Boston Bruins are one of those teams you have to keep an eye on. And like I said, I think they have a legit shot. They're one of the top teams in that division. I'm not too worried about the Boston Bruins, but they just had a rough week. They could easily come back from that going into next week. So that means that number 7 is the team they played last night, the New York Islanders. Now, it was one of those things. I could have had, Boston at 6 or potentially 5, but I just feel like because of last night, it was close enough. With this, obviously, the Islanders have an advantage over the Boston Bruins. They beat them now 3 times so far this season. Where the Boston Bruins have had a ton of success against Philly, they not so much with the New York Islanders. It's just not a great matchup for the Bees. And, I had to put the Islanders ahead of them. The Islanders have been really solid. They found a way to get some wins. Like I said, they lost a couple games to Pittsburgh last week. That didn't help them too much. Kept Pittsburgh in the running. But, they found ways to beat Buffalo. They found ways to beat teams that they're supposed to beat. And, with Sugar on top beating Boston by 5 goals, beating them 7-2. So, good sign of things to come here for the Islanders. That means at number 6, heading out west to Nevada, is those Vegas Golden Knights. They've tripped a little bit on themselves. They still have an 11-4-1 record, which is still really good. But we still have our concerns in Vegas. Obviously, the goaltending has been very solid, which has helped hinder that. But the injuries and, their matchups against Colorado have hurt them a little bit. They've struggled against the Avs, lost 2 of 3. So, again, I'm not too concerned about Vegas. But they had a rough week. They had to play Colorado, and they just weren't able to win those games. At number 5 is the Carolina Hurricanes. I have to watch more of the Carolina Hurricanes because they have been skyrocketing up power rankings as well as mine and up the standings. I mean, this is the Carolina Hurricanes team, very low-key, just taking over. And this could be a team to really watch in the playoffs this year, especially as a contender in the Central. I was a little bit worried about them. Really, the talk in Carolina has been more about the situation with Rod Brind'Amour. Is he going to stay the head coach this offseason? It seems like they're working on a contract renewal. But with the way they're playing right now, Rod Brind'Amour signed that ink right now because he's got a team that's doing very well. At number 4 in our power rankings, moving up again, is the Edmonton Oilers. The Edmonton Oilers, what they did against Vancouver earlier this week was just a testament to what we've seen from them. They didn't play well for 2 periods in Vancouver, and they stole it in the 3rd period. They found a way to win games. And we're seeing goal scoring from the depth guys. It's not just the top guys in Edmonton. Everybody's getting on the board for the Oilers. And this is really what they've needed. We've been preaching this for years since we've seen Draisaitl and McDavid come onto the scene. You need decent goaltending, average NHL goaltending, and just a little bit of goal scoring from your bottom 6 and your golden. And we are finally seeing that from the Edmonton Oilers. Is this sustainable? Any team with Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, it's sustainable. But the problem is the bottom 6 going to continue to score? And is the goaltending going to continue to be as good as it is? That's still up for debate. So moving up into the top 3, I'm going to take a quick break. All right, we're good. At number 3, Tampa Bay Lightning. Enough said. Tampa Bay has been very solid this year. They've had their struggles against the Florida Panthers, which obviously they're ahead of them in the power rankings, but the Tampa Bay Lightning have been a solid team. They won last night against Carolina, I think, 3-1. It comes down to the little things for Tampa. And when you have, I think now 10 guys having their first career goals in the NHL this season, that just shows the depth that Julien Brisebois has with the Tampa Bay Lightning. Now, obviously, you could give some credit to Steve Yzerman for bringing in some of those guys like Barré-Boulet. But Colton got his first NHL goal this past week. Congratulations to him. Barré-Boulet playing in his first NHL game. Little French boy there. So congratulations on playing your first NHL game, getting your first NHL goal. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, the kryptonite to this team is their backup. If Andrei Vasilevsky isn't in between the pipes, this team tends to struggle more. But who would have thought we'd have a power rankings in the middle of, at the end of February this year, where Tampa Bay and Florida are in the top 3? Who would have thought? So that means at number 2, it's the Florida Panthers, guys. Yes, they did move down a spot this week. They are not number 1. They were number 1 last week. But they are number 2. So at number 2 and at number 3, you have the Florida teams. Isn't that amazing? That is literally amazing. So, yeah, the Florida Panthers, hello. Yes, they are here. And yes, they have been here to stay over the past couple weeks. When I said, I don't know, is it going to be consistent? Is this a proven commodity? We're starting to see that. I mean, if you want to invest stock into the Florida Panthers, potentially winning the Cup this year or being a contender, now might be a good time to do that before everybody jumps on the hype train. Maybe something you want to consider. So that means at number 1, we're heading to the Scotia North Division. A team that has had their fair share of issues, but they still find themselves toward the top of the power rankings every week. The Toronto Maple Leafs, the mecca of hockey. Now, let me just say, their record helps them a lot here. If they didn't have the record they do, I'd be more concerned. But if you look at the way they play, you're still seeing issues from guys like William Nylander and John Tavares. And those kind of things are what's going to hurt this Leafs team in the postseason. Or even Morgan Riley, if you want to go that far. So, the Leafs are at the top. But it's very, there's a glass floor here. There is not a lot of room for error. Because the goaltending hasn't been that good. And they just have not been able to consistently play with, a good work ethic. And I hate using that word, but I feel like there's no other real word to use for it. The Toronto Maple Leafs, yes, you have Austin Matthews, who has been unreal this year. He is a huge factor for this team, as well as that guy Mitch Marner, pretty solid he's playing with. At some point, if they haven't already, we're going to see Mitch Marner go down to that second line, just to help out John Tavares and Nylander, because it's gotten gross how bad they have been, and it's hopefully they're able to fix this. The goaltending has been on and off, consistently. Thank God they have guys that can score goals. But at the end of the day, I feel like I'm talking mad smack about them. But they're number 1 in our power rankings. Listen, the record speaks for itself. The record doesn't lie. And the Toronto Maple Leafs are where they are because they have a very skilled team. And how far does that take them? I don't know. We haven't seen a champion from this, really in a long time, but who knows? It could happen. But at the end of the day, when it gets to the grind of the postseason, that's where the Leaf fans want to see the real Toronto Maple Leafs. That's, we've seen this before, where they're good during the regular season, a top 5 team in the NHL standings, and they really struggle. And the Leafs, once they go into the postseason, they have their issues. We'll see what happens. Is this the year for not Tampa Bay Lightning? They won last year. Is this the year for the Toronto Maple Leafs, where they should be planning their parade like they did when they signed to John Tavares? Or is this going to be another uproar season in Toronto? We're probably going to find out sometime in the next couple months. So, guys, going to give you a quick overview of our power rankings. Like I said, some of the big movers. Anaheim staying at number 31. Nashville and the Rangers kind of around the same pack. Ottawa really had a nice jump up with a 3-game winning streak this week. Calgary definitely regressed, especially after that loss last night to Ottawa. And the Islanders doing quite well this week, moving ahead of Boston after their victory last night. And the Carolina Hurricanes, kind of the little sneaky fuckers here, because they kind of seem to be climbing up the ladder, and nobody's really talking about them all that much. So, guys, that is it for our Week 6 NHL Power Rankings. Do you agree with my Power Rankings? Do you disagree with my Power Rankings? Let me know your thoughts in the comments section down below. Guys, stay tuned every Friday night, 6 p.m. Eastern. We have a weekly Power Rankings. So if you're interested in next week's Power Rankings, like I said, every Friday night at 6 p.m. Eastern. And if you guys like what we're doing here at Goal Line Hockey and want to see the latest news around the NHL, make sure to give this video a big thumbs up and even bigger subscribe down below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all next Friday.